Welcome back. Let's talk about composition, shall we? What does composition and the guitar have in common? Well, everything. I compose a lot of my music. I compose a lot of my music just pen to paper, stream of consciousness. So I oftentimes don't even have an instrument near me when I compose. For instance, here's some music that I wrote, just pen to paper. There you go. Look at that. There's it is. Look at that. It's a few pages of that. There's the first page. Now with this little composition here, this little solo line, there's no time signature, there's no nothing. It's just notes and rhythms. A little sketch of things. So what I end up doing, what I feel what needs to be practiced over years, and I've been composing for decades now, is you have to internalize certain intervals, scales, melodic motions, and you can kind of get a sense of the way music is moving. So, for instance, Bach, Beethoven, certain composers, Beethoven was deaf. He probably couldn't hear a lot of the music, but I have a feeling he knew what it sounded like, or at least had a general idea of what it sounded like. Therefore, you can compose this stuff without an instrument. You can just sit and write music. So if you're not musically literate, I recommend you learn. It's not too hard. It takes a little bit of practice. And I learned it when I was pretty young. I was about 14 years old, and I taught myself to read and write music. And by the time I was about 15, 16, I started writing full orchestral pieces. I was studying Beethoven scores and Bach scores and playing through Bach's music. And what I think what you come to know is, so if I write something, if I compose something like this, so if I write on the page, I write a bunch of minor arpeggios, I know what they're going to sound like. I know what they're going to sound like in succession. So, for instance, I've internalized, say, a melodic motion like this. I know what that sounds like in my head. Or even... So, I know what these intervals sound like. So, it's getting to know these intervals and oftentimes getting to know them on an instrument, whether it's a piano, a guitar, a bass, anything. Oftentimes I would be sitting there in my head, because I would do a lot of composition in class in high school. Teachers would get mad at me for it. But I'd sit there and I would almost be playing the guitar in my head, because at the time I knew how a pentatonic scale sounded. And a minor scale. So I knew. Now, if I was writing this stuff just pen to paper, I didn't know exactly what it sounded like, but I had a general idea and I knew what harmonies would work and what might not work. So I recommend to all musicians who are musically literate, just to compose, just to put some dots on paper, and it will inform you, and then kind of do a sort of post-mortem on them, and then go through it after the fact and see what it sounds like. So put the notes on paper. If you can, compose your piece all the way through to the end sometimes, and then go back and play it, or enter it into Finale software and see what it sounds like after the fact. So, and there's all kinds of free software now that's available. You can do that. If you're not musically literate, I recommend you keep practicing. I recommend you just keep running your scales, learning licks, learning music that fulfills your heart and soul. Whether it's whether it's blues riffs or anything. I mean, we all love blues. So keep playing, and then the thing is, I can put on paper, and I know what that's going to sound like. Even, for instance, I could do something even a little bit more complex, and ultimately, once I get it on the page, Now I'm going to know not what it sounds like, but I'll have an idea. And that's sometimes enough to get started. So I highly recommend, if you're not musically literate, learn to. It's not hard. If you can count to 4 and you know the alphabet to G, you can learn to read music and write music. If I can figure it out, it's not that hard, honestly. So, that being said, it takes time, but the important things take time. So, if you can internalize certain structures in music, like for instance, the movement of a 5 chord to a 1 chord, or even say, you're going to know what that resolution sounds like, and you can put it on paper. Also, studying some basic harmony and counterpoint would help as well, i.e. studying Bach, Beethoven. Study the scores, get the scores and read them and listen to the music. And I recommend getting hard copies of the scores. There's scores online, but it's good to have them so you can have the reference point to refer to. So that's how I do a lot of my compositions. So here's another page. So just like random sketches. Oh, it's the same book. And you can see the compositions I have on my page here were composed the same way. My piano sonata, even my marimba flute duet, which I really like, was composed just pen to paper. Never grabbed an instrument. But I was writing this marimba line that was kind of like this. It was something like... something like that. And then it moved up. So on paper, I could put... and I knew what it sounded like. Yeah, so... yeah, and for instance, because I have internalized these intervals, I knew when I put that on paper what it would sound like. And so shifting that, and I knew once... somebody's just writing quit. Anyways, so I wanted to talk about composition. So that was the main points I wanted to talk about. So experiment, put dots on paper if you can. Learn to read music. It does help. It's a lot of fun. Once you learn more theory, they say the creativity can go away. There's a little bit of truth to that. But the thing is you have to learn that stuff and then sort of learn to unlearn it. And stay a beginner, as they say. How long have you played for? I've been playing guitar for 26 years. Bass for 26 years. Guitar for slightly less. But, so 26 years on the instrument. Yeah, I'm old. Yeah, so I think... yeah, those were the points I wanted to talk about. So I think more composers should do this. And if you are a composer or even a jazz musician, you should. I was self taught for the first 2 years. So, or I guess more than 2 years. I didn't really take even a guitar lesson until I was already learning jazz. So I probably didn't take a serious guitar lesson until 7 years into music. So I took my first real guitar lesson. So I think it's important to experiment, have fun. The whole point is you're supposed to play music. That's the whole philosophy here. There's no, that's about it. Whether you're playing Mozart or playing Beethoven, you're playing. You're playing the World Cup, you're playing the World Series. It's still a game, it's still music. So enjoy yourself, strive to learn. That's sort of my philosophy on it. I'll be talking about this stuff more on, more as we go, and doing more live streams. I do like the questions and stuff. That there's a lot of people. I like the haters too. Some guy just kept writing a word that I'm not going to say and telling me to quit, but that's awesome. I love him. He's great. What is his name? Brett. I'll screenshot you, Brett, and I'll find your page and see what music you've posted. It's interesting. But everything here I post. I had someone telling me recently that you have to play with nails to play classical guitar, which is not true. You do not need nails to play classical guitar. So, yeah, keep writing your stuff and having fun, and have a good night. I'll be back soon. Take care. Peace.